Hello, this is Victor Zuniga from the Poudre River Public Library District, and this is Loan Rule Cleanup using SQL and Excel. Thank you so much for making the time to attend this session. I hope you find it useful. It has definitely been a great opportunity for us to explore this topic and do something with it. So I hope that you get a benefit out of this as well. Let me tell you a little bit about Poudre River Public Library District, or Purple D, as it is known nearby. We are located in Fort Collins, Colorado. We have 5 buildings, 3 branches, 1 storage/collection development facility, 1 answer center, which is the frontline customer service via phone or email, our communications department, and our administration staff within this same building. Currently, we have 140,000 patron accounts on our system. We are a turnkey server, currently on release 5.2, and in the midst of a server migration from on-prem servers to AWS. So yes, quite a few things going on right now. All right, so a little bit of background over the project itself. So, over the years we have customized several loan rules, which are in essence 98% duplicate of the previous loan rule. As we started reviewing our own structure, we realized a lot of duplication. The unique parameters primarily dealt with item cost or fine charge amounts. Since we went fines free in 2020, the need to maintain variations of the same rule with different fine charge amount structure, became obsolete. It's easy to create a new rule and change a few parameters. However, down the road, it becomes more challenging to remove it from the system, as we have come to learn, because you deal with items that are currently checked out and potentially in collection. So the longer you wait for doing something like this, the more complex it becomes to do that migration, that transfer of items. So hopefully this will help in your efforts to make it happen sooner, hopefully. All right. So our initial strategy was to ensure the proper transition to remove duplicates in the system while ensuring the least amount of disruption for patrons. This, given to the fact that many of the items are currently checked out, some of them are on hold, and some of them are currently in collections. So we wanted to start by merging duplicate loan rules to the lowest number on that loan rule table. As an example, moving loan rule 51 into loan rule 4. Renaming that loan rule convention to landing period instead of material type. Currently, we have a lot of duplicates that were based on that material type, and we're trying to move away from that. We're trying to make it about the landing period, which provides more flexibility to accommodate our current structure. That will also address issues for materials funneling to different I types, which we encounter with some testing that it started as a test, but eventually just stay there, remain as items masked with a different I type just for the purpose of that test. And we wanted to be more transparent and more accurate in our reports in terms of the circulation for our library. Along those lines, don't delete duplicate entries from the loan rule table, at least not initially. This will cause remaining entries to change their ID within the system, causing chaos and confusion. What do I mean by that? If you were to remove loan rule 51, that in itself changes the numbers for all the rules after that rule. So you want to be really, really careful about that, because suddenly loan rule perhaps is not what you were intending in the beginning, you know. So just be really careful. The recommendation that we were given by tech support instead was to rename those entries with OK to reuse. You know, that way you're not affecting the order of those IDs in the system. You're just renaming it to let other people know that those can be reutilized or recycled. And once you do that, you can then proceed to deactivate those duplicate loan rules from the loan rule determiner table as well, which is the end goal here. All right, so as for our strategy, the first thing we wanted to do was to gather this information and export that into a spreadsheet. As you can imagine, there's roughly 58 fields for each loan rule on your system. So if you multiply that times the total amount of loan rules you have, it can amount to a fair amount of entries. We noticed right away that it was proving a little bit challenging to try to compare apples to apples based on the amount of fields on each rule. So we ended up using the concatenate function within Excel. That function in itself, what it does is that grabs the value for those 58 fields and place it into a different column where you can create that unique string that you can see over here. The cool thing about this is that allows for a quick matching between duplicates. From here, you can start grouping those duplicates. In our particular case, as I mentioned, each rule has 58 fields. So for us, it meant looking to 4,002 fields to compare. So once you start grouping those duplicates, you get something like this. This template provides an easier way to group duplicates and color code those loan rules that have been removed or renamed from your system. You can see those coded in red as the ones that we have removed or renamed with the OK to reuse label. As you can see, this provides a quick way for you to see what remains to be worked on, and you can share this with your circulation staff. You know, it's a nice way to then look at it all together at the same time. This made life a lot easier for us because we're able to provide a quick status and share this document with other staff members, both management and circulation staff. Okay, so how do we get there? We have now a strategy. We need to think in terms of the procedure. How do we accomplish all this? Well, we started by using SQL and kind of taking a look behind the scenes in a couple different ways that normally create list does not allow to give you a sense of what's going on. Then you export a copy, which also serves as a backup for you of the current loan rule table entries. You import that file into Excel. Then you create a transitional I-type, which will be useful to transfer those items from one loan rule to the new one or existing one, in this case the lowest one. You test by identifying and then generated a group of items via create list. Export those results and then limit that to only the export by patron barcode and item barcode. Update the iType via global update. Then perform a batch renewal using the Sierra offline client. This action forces the items to attach to the desired loan rule. Switching the iType by itself just does that. It just updates the iType, but it doesn't force the new loan rule to be attached. So this one is a key element in doing this process. Last but not least, double check your work. Make sure that the end result is what you are aiming for before you start making more changes on your system. Okay, so we were talking about SQL and how we could utilize this tool to take a look behind the scenes. Here, as you can see, it's a little bit cut off, but what is missing there is just the initial statement, the select. Basically, what this statement is doing here is checking out and returning loan rules checked out or items checked out by the loan rule and the opcode. So the opcode in this case, if we read that statement, basically what it says is return all items that are currently using loan rule 51 and they are in the opcode different than I. In this case, I stands for checked in. So as you can see in the column right here, the opcode, what uses O and R, and O stands for checked out and R stands for renewal, which is what we want. We want all items that are checked out or that have been renewed. A few items, a few elements here that could be useful to you could be the due date, if you want to keep an eye on that, as well as the stat group. Application name, this is just for illustration purposes. But again, it gives you a sense of the number of items that are currently checked out under that particular loan rule. Okay. Another query that we used and found extremely useful was this right in front of you right now. Basically what this does is selects and groups by loan rule the number of items currently checked out. Why is this useful? Well, in our particular case, it allowed us to look at the loan rules with the lowest number of items. And this was our initial point to start testing. You know, it's easier to do a test with 300 items than it is with 368,000 items. So it gave us a picture of the system and what was currently going on. We also used another query which gave us a sense by loan rule and renewal count of how many renewals our patrons were utilizing. This was important for us because we were in need of using one of those renewals. Currently, we have up to 6 renewals for our patrons. And so what we ended up finding is that on average, our patrons use between 2 and 3 renewals, which was perfect. It gave us plenty of room to grab one of those remaining renewals to push the change on the system for the records attached to their patron account. So again, this was a nice way for us to see how many renewals patrons were using. And as you can see, only one patron right here is using or maxing out on those 6 renewals. But for everyone else, it was somewhere between 2 and 3. This also gave us a quick glance at the overdue count, and this is the overdue notices. How many notices have they reached on the system? So again, and we will see this in a little bit, we wanted to make sure that we were not changing the loan rule for items already in collections. That was very important to us because it changed the dynamic a little bit. The schedule that the notices, the overdue notice applies is slightly different. And if you change that once the item is in collection, it can do a couple unexpected things. So we chose not to mess with that, essentially. All right, so now that we have been able to take a look at behind the scenes using SQL and see how many items are attached to a specific loan rule and the average number of renewals as well as the average number of overdues for each patron, or an average, we're going to move forward and then go to the loan rules table. Right here you can see the path, which is admin, parameters, circulation, and then loan rules. You go ahead and click on it, and then you will find in your system the loan rules table. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is go ahead and click on this option right here, the export option. This will give you the ability to export all your loan rules into a CSV file. Right after that, we're going to go ahead into your item types table. So the path for that is admin, parameters, general, then itypes. Go ahead and click on that. And this part for us was about finding a section or a range of itypes that were available. We chose the 300 range, which is not being used right now, and used that as our range for creating transitional itypes. You can see that with that word at the end. And this is a matter of preference. We decided to put it at the end because we didn't want to confuse our staff by putting the word first and not being able to identify the type of material that they were looking at, so we kept it exactly the same, in this case magazines and news, and then put transitional at the end as a way to identify the distinction between the regular itype and the transitional or testing type that we're going to be using to transfer those items back and forth. So again, on the item types table, especially now that we have a higher amount of entries on this table, I think up to 2,000, select a range, depending on how many items you're planning to switch or transfer. We selected the 300s. If you have more items than that, then just grab 300 through 500. In our particular case, the 300s was plenty, and so that's what we started with. All right. Now that we have created our first transitional itype, then we're going to go to the loan rule determiner table. The path for that table is admin, parameters, circulation, loan rule determiner. Once you click on it, you're going to get that table and all the entries on it. As you can see here highlighted, at the end of this entry on the item type column, you see that 309, which is that transitional itype that we want. I'm adding this here because eventually I want items from a duplicate to move into this loan rule, okay? And so in order to push this and to make sure that it's not affecting those items which are already checked out, I want to put that before I start moving items back and forth. So very important thing to keep in mind as you follow the process. All right, so next thing is creating or generating a create list. And so you can see here the query, and basically what it says is search for items with loan rule number 4 and number of overdues less or equal to 2. Again, our limit for that is 4, and that third overdue is our final notice or our final overdue before it goes into collections. And so it was very important for us to not risk it if items were already in transition to be billed or already billed and in collections. The next line is, item status not equal to N, which on our system translates to billed. And the last line is items with I type equal to 309, which is that transitional I type. All right. Now, the next thing is global update. Global update is a great tool for this type of projects because it allows you to do a batch update of hundreds and thousands of records quickly and efficiently. So from this window on global update, we want to make sure that this right here, this drop down is set to review, and then the record type is set to item, and on this review file drop down that you have the correct create list selected. In this case, loan rule simplification project, I have 61 items, and that is correct. So we're good to go, Then we proceed to do a right click on that bar right underneath the review file drop down menu, and then toggle into the item fixed length fields, and then select the I type. Click on it, and this will give you a breakdown by I type. Now, because we are selecting only magazines, that's what it's showing you. But if you wanted to include multiple I types, it will give you that breakdown where you can easily see the different I types that you're about to change. You can also see that we have 5 items that need to be reviewed here because apparently they don't have an I type set. So that will be for us to take a look later. All right. Next, you go into the command input, which is right here on the left hand side, and then click on add. Once you click on add, you're gonna get this window right here, and then go ahead and select change fixed length field. You will be presented with this window right here. Make sure to find field 61, which is the number ID, the ID for I type. Then look to find, in this case for us is I type 109, either 109 or 9, which is magazines and news. Once you find it, you can also double click and you will get a list of those I types if you don't know or remember the I type number. And then we're telling the system to replace that number, that I type, with our transitional I-type, which is the 309 magazine and news I-type that we said earlier in the system. Once we do that, go ahead and click OK on that, and you should be able to see something similar to this, where it will say I-type 9 to be replaced with 309. Okay? Next, we click on Preview, which again is on the left-hand side. And then you should be able to see something similar to this. The record number, the old or the current state for that particular record, and what is about to happen, which is the setting that I-type to 309. Take a moment, review this list, make sure that it's correct and accurate before you commit the changes. Once you're ready and you have verified that everything is in place, go ahead and click Process. And this right here is going to commit those changes into the system. So again, and I cannot emphasize this enough, double check that this right here is accurate so that you don't have to reverse engineer all that process in order to bring things back to normal. As a suggestion, if it's the first time that you're doing it, try just with one record or two records, and then once you're more comfortable, go ahead and start adding more records to your testing. Start small and go from there. All right. Okay, so as we were talking on creating that list and exporting that list of items to do the transfer, we only need two fields, and that is the patron barcode and the item barcode. For privacy issues, we just ended up blurring most of them to protect our patrons' information. But the concept applies. You see here two columns, which stand for exactly that, the patron and the item barcode. You export that into, or import that into Excel. And once you do that, you grab those two columns and then go ahead and open Word, Microsoft Word. After you have pasted those columns A and B from the Excel document into Word, highlight them on the document. On the World ribbon, the Table Tools section will pop into view. Select Layout, Convert to Text, Separate Text with Tabs, which is the default. Keeping those two columns highlighted, use the Find Replace function to change the tabs, which is that caret and the T, to columns. Now we're going to use the Find and Replace function to add the renewal date and time, the correct stat group, and today's date and time. Now you can see here the caret and that letter P. That stands for a paragraph break. Okay. Dates are in the format of year, month, date, along with the hour and the minutes. The year is only using 2 digits. So here you can see this particular string right here will stand for April 13, 2020. And this last part right here, the 0400 is the time, 4 in the morning. These 3 digits right here, that will be your stat group. As you can see right here, this O in the system, it stands for renewal, which is what we want to do. We want to do a batch renewal of those items. So we want to make sure that that O is right there, followed by the column, which in this case is a delimiter for all the different pieces of the data that we need to import into the system. And then, as you can see, last but not least is today's date, March 23rd, 2020, and then the date, which is 4 in the morning or 0400. Okay, so in the end, you should end up with a string similar to this right here. So for example, if we need to renew items due on March 23rd, which in this case we're using that day as today's date, for 21 days, that will put us on April 13. You know, we will then use that string and that logic to format the string that way. After you're done with that, delete any extra data from the end of the list and add the renewal date, which is what the system is going to use to extend that renewal, since we're going to be passing this through the Sierra offline client. You want all the rows to be same width and start with O, which is, again, it stands for renew, followed by that column, and then end with the stat number. And the stat number, it can be useful for you in terms of tracking the items that you are uploading this way, as well as if you want to do it for different branches with different stat groups. All right. Once you have this formatted in a correct way, go ahead and save it as plain text, not a Word document, but just as a plain text. Save it in a folder with today's date, and then the name should be circ dat, D-A-T, dat, the stat number, dat txt. And there's a reason for this. We'll see that in a minute. All right. Now that we have that file ready, we're going to be using it to put it into the circ offline client. As I mentioned earlier in the previous slide, there was a reason for the naming of that file. If you have ever worked with the offline circulation client, there is a specific format that the file takes, which is circ.dat. That's the extension where it stores all the information whenever you are using the offline client. We're going to use this in reverse to populate that file and then upload it into the system. So we're going to start by locating that file that you save, open the file in Notepad, and now we're going to go ahead and rename that file as circ.dat. Make sure to use quotation marks so it's safe as a DAT file, and txt is not appended to that in addition. Go ahead and save it into your offline client folder, which typically is on your hard drive under C, Millennium, or Sierra, depending if you're still using the old client or if you haven't renamed it. And then it should say offline, and under that folder, that's where you store this file. Once you have it there, make sure that you're replacing it. There will be an existing file there. So make sure to replace it and make sure that that file is empty. If that file is not empty, you may want to make a copy of that file. Once you do that, go ahead and place it into that folder. And now having that ready, we can go ahead into the offline client, into File, and then go into Upload Circulation and Patron Data. Go ahead and click on that. You're going to be prompted with a question: is the server ready to receive transactions? Go ahead and click yes. And once you click yes, the transactions are going to be uploaded into the system. Now, we're assuming that you're only using this for one single stat group. Should you need to create files for different stat groups, you'll have to repeat the process of placing that file into the folder as many times as you need to upload those files with a different stat group. So just something to keep in mind. Right. Okay, so now we have uploaded those transactions and they are ready to be processed. Now we head into the Sierra desktop application and we're gonna go into the offline processing, offline file processing, module, which is typically under the circulation functions. Okay. We want to make sure that these two options are unchecked, and then we want to check on this drop down menu, select the file. It should be only one there. Select it. Once it's selected, go ahead and click on process all files. Okay. In the view log files drop down, click the arrow to bring up the various stat groups that were uploaded if you did multiple. You may see some error messages. If you do, just go through the file and go through those error messages, review that, and make sure to fix those before moving forward with more processing. Hopefully you wouldn't have any error messages, but it's always good to check that, just to double check. One thing to keep in mind here is that items renewed this way don't send the patron a date due slip like they would normally do if they are renewed within the Sierra desktop client. So you don't have to worry about that notification being sent to the patron because we're doing this behind the scenes. So it's not triggering any alert or any email notification to the patron that the item has been renewed. So just something to keep in mind. Okay. So we're at the end of the process. Again, as you finish that and you process those offline transactions and merge those into the system, then you have finally merged those items into the desired loan rules. A couple things that we have learned with this process, because we are still working on this. Avoid items already in collections. Renewing an item already in collections wipes the fines from the patron account. This wasn't an issue for us because, again, we went fines free in 2020. But if there were any type of item related charges, it could wipe those out of the patron account. It would retain that collection charge on the account, but anything else that is accrued as part of fines or charges, manual charges, those could be wiped from the account. And so, if you are still charging fines, that's definitely something you want to keep an eye on. because you don't want to wipe those if your library relies on that as a revenue source. In our particular case, we decided to process items up to that second overdue notice. We have up to 4 overdue notices. Third notice is the final overdue before it goes into that 4th notice, which triggers that item or that patron to be sent into collections. And so we didn't want to mess around with trying to grab items that were in the process to going into collections or being billed. And so we decided that the second notice was a safe point to stop that criteria, to use that as a criteria. Start small, definitely start small. Your first test should be with 1 or 2 items, just so that you get familiar with the process and kind of like all the different nuances in terms of exporting the data, comparing the data, massaging the data, putting that together into the file, and then uploading that into the system. It's a good way to get familiar and comfortable with the process. Do a few more tests because it never hurts to be prepared. And the more you test, the more comfortable you are in doing this process later on. Once you are comfortable and confident with it, proceed to process all the items within one of the duplicates. Keep in mind what we were talking earlier in the presentation, and look at one of those long rules that have a very low amount of items attached to them. Those are great for this type of testing. Use the long rule duplicate spreadsheet, which we will be providing a copy of it as a visual reference. It's a great way for you to share with your senior circulation staff. It's always good to have an extra set of eyes, especially for something like this, because you may not see changes right away, but unintended consequences can take place later on when those items start to be due, And so early in our process, we saw how some items that were supposed to be due within 21 days ended up being due earlier than that. And so it's always good to do it just with a few items. You minimize the impact and you get to learn on how to tweak this to match your particular setup and your workflow within your library. Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Victor Zuniga. If you have any questions, here's my email address. I'm looking forward to the Q&A session in a little bit. I hope you guys had a great conference, and thank you so much. All right, see you in a bit.